You are welcome to my Jerusalem. This is the 21st century look of the city of David, whose much construction in ancient times, recounted in the Bible, was done by King Solomon, the son of David, Solomon the Wise. The area view, aided by Israeli technology, clearly exposes the extent to which the Jewish state has turned a desert into a complete oasis in their roughly 7 decades of existence in the concert of nations. Transformed as one of the most attractive cities in the world, over 700,000 people live in Jerusalem as Jews, Christians, Muslims, believers and non-believers, Pharisees, Sadducees, and Gentiles in a multicultural realm today.
After 15 minutes, they saw I was studying. I study.
After landing at the country's largest and busiest airport, the lone commercial one now, the Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv, the partial capital of the Jewish state, I joined over 10 other African journalists, beneficiaries of an Israeli government media exchange program, through the Experience Israel tour, to see the Promised Land for the very first time, face to face.
We are in one of the most holy places in the world, the very most important place in the Islamic religion, and the most important place in the Jewish religion, and one of the most strategic places in Christianity, with the most important church just found behind here.
Jerusalem's existence spans 3,000 years before the Christian era, our era. I learned in school, and is one of the most unique places in the world, located between the Dead and the Mediterranean seas, and full of walls and tourist-attracting environments. I see in reality the things learned from the Bible and from storytellers. And this is one of them, the Temple Mount in Old City Jerusalem, with centuries-old stories like the construction of the first and second temples, a place viewed as the seat of the world's 3 monotheistic religions: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. The places here are so strategic, so holy, and so important that each stopover merits a thorough explanation to clearly know where I am found.
We are in the Christian port, and as you see, we didn't get any checks, no doors, no gates, no fences, no anything.
The Temple Mount counts 4 quarters, one for the Jewish people, another for the Christians, the other for the Muslims, and the Armenian community, one of the earliest Christian communities to have settled here, plus 2,000 years ago. This is the Lamentation Wall, also known as the Western Wall, the holiest place for the Jews, beneath Mount Moriah, where Abraham offered the son Isaac as a sacrifice to Yahweh, according to the Old Testament, in which the Jews believe in.
The symbol of David was the Star of David. Actually, no. The Star of David was first used as a Jewish symbol only in the Middle Ages, as we know it. So tradition will say it's the Star of David and will continue tradition, but actually, under historian point of view, only from the Middle Ages we know it as a Jewish traditional symbol, okay?
The sanctity of the place requires the observation of strict religious rules, such as the wearing of this cap before touching the wall, which attracts many tourists each year around the world. In these locations, where the prophet Elijah went to heaven body and soul, according to Jewish history and beliefs. In this area, where women and men pray separately according to Jewish observations, and I do same, because when you go to Rome, do what the Romans are doing.
You were there. Did you drop a note? And if you did, what was the content?
Oh, wow. The Western Wall, in my country, we popularly call it the Wailing Wall, because we've had our leaders come there, take snapshots. I mean, they trend. And anyone who comes to Israel obviously wants to go to the Western Wall. And so it's true. It's symbolic, not just in Judaism and not just to people who are here in Israel or other religions, but also to us who are Christians from where we come from. Did I drop a note? Yes, I did. Actually, 2 notes. I took 2 notes. I took time to really think from my heart what is it that I want to write. And the first note was obviously praying for Israel and for peace. So I wrote down that I pray that God will bring peace, that there will be peace in Israel, that those families and people who have been scattered abroad, coming back home to live in a peaceful environment, because I love Israel, and so many of us do. So that's the first piece of note that I wrote. The second one was now personal, was more of praying for myself, praying that for God's guidance in everything that I do in life, in His call, praying for my family, and praying for the future of my family, and praying for my daughter as well.
We have roughly 5 million Muslims a year. We have about 10,000 Jews a year and roughly 500,000 Christians a year. That should be a huge security operation for the Israeli police, right?
Well, that's specifically to the Temple Mount.
Absolutely. I mean in this area, yeah, sure.
In the Western Wall itself, we have more than 2 million visitors per year. So in general, we have millions of people that are visiting. So it's a tremendous coordination which has to be made. Our offices are located in all of the different areas which we've mapped out, so we have enough officers to the right place at the right time, including hundreds of people who have arrived in the different areas. The Jewish, when we have significant festivals, the Jewish festivals, the Muslim festivals, as well as Christian festivals.
Above the Western Wall is this, the Dome of the Rock and the Ashka Mosque, the 3rd holiest place in Islam. The followers of Mohammedanism claim this is where the Prophet Muhammad descended into heaven and celestially received from Allah the 5 pillars of Islam, including a 5-time daily prayer schedule. Only Muslims enter the buildings, filmed from a distance, with a beautiful country scenery. The Muslim quarter of the Temple Mount is under a Jordanian charity administration, but Israeli police ensure security to the maximum level.
We have 360 cameras that are located in and around the different areas within 1.1 square mile, help us cover all of the different narrow pathways, because in the old city you can only walk around. There are no cars in the old city. And so we have to make sure that our officers that are on the ground patrolling the different areas have a clear understanding of what is taking place. So in fact, there are 360 cameras which are the eyes up above. They're the eyes that are giving the information to our officers on the ground. If we see someone suspicious, for example, arriving into one of the areas, the information of what that person is, how they look, what they're dressed, their identification, or any other information that we have will be transferred to our officers on the ground, and therefore our officers can approach those individuals, a suspect, and ask them, where are you heading to? What is your idea? Where do you want to go to? And any other information which is necessary.
The Muslim quarter is a huge contrast to the Jewish quarter. Its streets are busier, more crowded, with vendors, especially within the famous shulk, selling all variety of products. And this is where Jesus walked through. A contrast to the other quarters where shops are generally selling religious or tourist appealing products. Here the shulk is literally an Asian shopping mall in the 21st century where one can practice their bartering skills and buy almost everything unimaginable. As in the Jewish quarter and the rest of the old city, tourists wandering the streets of the Muslim quarter find it so hard to imagine how the locals go about their everyday business so normally in what is such an intense and looked upon place.
The Israeli National Police have to prevent any type of terrorist-related incident here in the Old City. The diverse police activities are number one, looking for suspects, number two, preventing criminal-related issues, and of course, any terrorist attacks that could happen. So our police officers that will respond to a criminal-related issue will be the same officer that will respond to a terrorist attack that could take place in any of the areas. So we've mapped out Jerusalem, mapped out the different public areas, central bus stations, train stations, the light railway, and we have different units that are located in different areas to prevent and respond to those types of incidents.
The old city of Jerusalem is entered by 7 gates, amongst them the Jaffa Gate. A few meters from it, we cross to enter this massive building, host to history of all sorts. This is the Church of the Sepulchre, where the Golgotha, the grave, the upper room, and the tomb of Jesus is found.
This is the Christian acclaimed grave of Jesus Christ here at the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and precisely at the Christian quarter, one of the 4 quarters at the Temple Mount, one of the most strategic religious places in the world. Over there is called the Golgotha, where it is believed Jesus was crucified. And just in front of me is another room where it is believed he took off his dresses before crucifixion. These are stories which are recounted in the Bible and Christian mythologies thousands of years ago. This place is so significant that millions of Christians over the centuries have been coming here to visit the grave of Jesus. And at the gravesite of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, here in Jerusalem and in the Christian quarter in particular, a place which has been transformed over the centuries because of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman invasion of the Holy Lands.
The current architectural outfit with medieval looks dates some 150 years ago because of events like the destruction of Jerusalem thousands of years ago and the Crusades period in Jerusalem's turbulent past, Ottoman invasion, Roman occupation, the fire of Jerusalem, Palestine occupation through the British, and you name the rest.
What struck you most about the place?
For me, it's 2 things. One is the Bible that I've read since I was born. I'm 35 years old now. And seeing everything come alive. It's almost like you've been reading text, it's theory, now it's practical. So, I mean, seeing the walls, seeing the path, seeing, I actually didn't even know that Mount Zion, Mount Olives, and then there's
Moriah.
Mount Moriah, that they're so close like that. And so it brings what I've read from the Bible coming up with life. You know, it's like breathing, pulsating, you know. And secondly is just looking at how they've managed to, you know, keep the places and the history and all that is so surreal for me. You know, it's at some point I think shed a tear or two because it was almost emotional. Like, you've read this and now you're seeing it, and for me it's almost like a prayer answered, because I've always wanted to come to Israel. I've always wanted to see these places.
Thousands of Christians throng the church each year as pilgrims to ensure religious vigils as they pass through the walls, through the tunnels, through the path of faith, to see their belief system face to face.
Which other areas struck you most in Israel?
Ultimately, I think for everyone, not just me, it's Golgotha, where Jesus was crucified. I mean, that I was watching, everyone was just walking along the path, and it's almost like that emotional moment where you come to yourself and you're reflecting on a lot, and that's, for me, was the highlight, I think, of the day. The other places are really cool, but that one, that this is actually where he was crucified. I mean, I've seen movies since we were children, Sunday schools, told stories that he was crucified between two thieves and all that, and it's almost like it's an ancient story, like a myth, but now you see that this is the rock, this is the place. It's almost unbelievable.
The holiness of the places takes away my religious avatar, my king's speech, my house of cards thought, and makes me a born again in the New Testament model.
Has something fundamentally changed in your life after that environment?
It's a very interesting question you've asked, because after we left the place, I almost wished I had Wi-Fi. I wanted to actually talk to my pastor or talk to my friends and just tell them, if you thought this thing is not real, it is real. And for me, to be quite honest, yes, it has changed me. It has changed me. I knew this was going to happen. But now going back, it's almost like my faith is built up, my belief is stronger, my resolve to believe what I've always believed now is stronger more than ever now that I've seen the place. And definitely, yes, I'm a changed man now.
The reconstructed walls of Jerusalem were partly the work of one Ottoman Empire leader, Suleiman the Magnificent, in the 16th century. And that explains partly why most of the inscriptions are in Arabic in this country, where Jews are about 6 out of 10, Muslims about 4 out of 10, and Christians about 3 out of 10.
What one bad habit you used to have that after leaving that place you are going to drop?
I wouldn't call it a bad habit. I'll just, being like a lazy Christian, or, being lazy in exercising faith. I think I'll, after today, because everything came out so real, now it's almost like I'm going to double my efforts in what I believe in. I'm going to double my efforts in terms of reading the Bible, talking to others about this place, about the experience there. I think I'm going to do that. I don't want to say I'm lazy, but I'll say I've not been to the level where I would really, really want, but after today, I think I'll have to drop that. Now I have to be a more committed, more serious Christian than ever.
And this is the tomb of Jesus, where his rich friend, Joseph of Arimathea, embalmed him after crucifixion and last breath on earth. There are so many wonders here. The 14 chambers the founder of Christianity went through in the era of King Herod. The upper room where the early apostles prayed and the Holy Ghost came down which allow them to speak in tongues, can still be seen and enacted.
Thutha wa kuonehoderwo Jesu Kristo athikirwo na kuringana na aria mamenyerete kana aria makoretwo makirora haha makauga ni handu ha bata muno hari ndini ya Gikristo na ni handu thirikari ya guku bururi wa Israel ehete gitio na njira na koguo ni handu hakoragwo hakirorwo na njira na kuringana na o haha hari kirima na nikio mwako uyu wa nigetha.
Today, Christians are the largest religious following in the world, with over 2.5 billion people. And here, the relics of early ones can be found and felt, like the one of Veronica, the real image of the young girl who saw Jesus first after resurrection. The power of the Orthodox Church is well demonstrated here as we go through the corrugated buildings, tunnels, gates, with a mix of Gothic, medieval, and Renaissance memories, as time has had an impact on them. The spiritual trip is immense. As a former student of history, especially Western beliefs, I worked with deep emotions, reason, feelings, and celestially arranged thoughts using the same parts some of the greatest men who ever lived marched on: Abraham, David, Solomon, Jesus, Herod, Mohammed, Elijah. I feel so complete, at least personally, to have entered the promised land Moses, the great liberator, only saw but did not march on. This land of great walls, great roads, great people, and great passages, each valuable to each community you talk to.
Around the world, we have at least 14 million Jews. In this country called Israel, there are roughly 6 million of them. And where I am standing is part of Jerusalem where we had the first Jewish community outside the walls. And I'm talking about the walls near the Mount of Temple, so sacred to Jews, Christian, and Muslim communities.
Outside the walls of Jerusalem, an inspiration for Donald Trump's war plans, ordinary life looms. I sit with others and our Jewish host for a bite. Time to enjoy, according to my host. After many years of a troubled past, like the Holocaust, many years in captivity. Remember the 450 years of enslavement in ancient Egypt, recounted in the Old Testament, although aware of their existential threats posed by their neighbors.
I mean, it's a great pleasure to be here. I have been doing journalism for 7 years now. Most of those years were at the Times of Israel, which is a website based here in Jerusalem. But 2 years ago, I've decided to become independent, and now I work with Jewish newspapers in the United States, mostly, and magazines. So I write more magazine articles, deep, in-depth articles, and a little bit less news. But I still closely follow diplomacy and Palestinian politics and Arab politics for my research. I have a research position. So if I give you my card at the end, you'll see that it's for the research center that I work for, not for a newspaper.
Constant browsing with my mobile phone becomes a routine for me in this country with timeless and limitless Wi-Fi services. Yaoundé is on my mind, and my entourage back home knows so well that I eat very little, and everyone here spots it out and tells me it is one of the reasons why I am almost a dash of man, as one of my senior colleagues and mentor, George Ebune, will always remind me in the office back in Yaoundé. And the good news is that through my constant browsing attitude, as individualistic as it can be in a family setting, I learned that my country's National Assembly building is on fire as we move late night to southern Israel. The journey down the hills enables me to marvel at the ingenuity of a people called by many as God's chosen people.
It's 2.7 meters. We will go inside so that you will feel how it feels to be inside the sewage pipe. Okay? It's yeah, just for the feeling. You know? Actually, it's really nice there. It feels like you're in a submarine or something. You don't feel like you're in a pipe. And it's located most of the time 30 meters underground, okay, depends. And we have 3 main lines, all of them together. It's 120 kilometers to the Shafdan. Because we don't have time, I will just say that we have the coastline, the Ayalon highway line, and the eastern line, which is the longest line in the world. Okay, all of them together, 120 kilometers to the Shafdan. Questions?
These are some samples of Jewish ingenuity in the desert, where water treatment centers look like a nightclub, where the sewage system looks like an underground metro system. Here, no single drop of water is useless, as everything is recycled and purified with some of the best advanced technologies in the world. We pause to learn how they function and how this first-class irrigation system for agrarian use operates. Everything in the Jewish state is full of history, traditions, symbolisms, and metaphors. The countryside south of the nation is a mix of beautiful scenery by geography. The carved mountainous landscapes define to an extent the agriculture of the people. The temperatures are nice as we approach Jericho, where the walls biblically collapsed. We pass through Sodom and Gomorrah, punished for sexual perversity, to arrive in this body of water. And Jesus walked on water on the Sea of Galilee. But this is the Dead Sea, one of the most unique water bodies in the world, found in Israel, and serves as the opposite of the highest point in the world.
Well, the Dead Sea is an internationally recognized site. It's first of all, it's the lowest point on Earth. We're now standing on literally the lowest point on Earth, around 470 meters beneath sea level. So it's pretty fascinating at that. And the sea itself is also very interesting. It has contains a lot of minerals, and it's very salty. That's why they call it the Dead Sea, because of the saltiness of the water. It doesn't allow for any living organism to live and prosper in it. There are no fish in this water, and no other living organism can live in it.
The Dead Sea Scrolls, which gave further insights into the Bible accounts of the New Testament, were retrieved from this water with the greatest degree of salinity in the world and a huge source of personal health brushing.
Interestingly enough, the density of the salt in this water is 12 times of the density of salt in the regular ocean water. And this is what allows the people, as we may see in the background, to float on the water literally and read a newspaper or something like that. Now the minerals inside the Dead Sea are very healthy for the skin. We may see footage of people rubbing their skin with mud. The mud is full of minerals that is extremely healthy for the skin, and this has become a very big tourist attraction. And people come from all over the world to enjoy bathing in the sea and also to enjoy some of the health benefits for the skin. and for the bones and for other medical issues as well. So it has a twofold effect of just regular tourism and also of health tourism.
To enter the Dead Sea, it is an entire ritual. You are identified upon arrival. You enter a dressing room to put on appropriate clothing, and you enter a crutch like this one that takes you to the waters, threatened by one of the greatest environmental challenges of our time, climate change.
Today is not a very clear day, but if it was a clear day, in the distance you would be able to see Jordan, which we share the Dead Sea, which is a natural, resource. We share it with the Kingdom of Jordan, our neighbors. And the biggest environmental challenge that we've been facing in the last few years, I would say in the last few decades, is the drying up of the sea, of the Dead Sea. The drying up of the sea, it has to do with, first of all, with environmental changes, with the warming of the earth, with the sun, the heat that has been dehydrating the sun, the lack of rainfall that prevents the sea from filling up, and also from many man-made things that we have done. There is a few companies, Israeli companies, that excavate chemicals from the sea. These chemicals are used for different industries, for the cosmetic industries, because as I mentioned earlier, the minerals are very good for the skin, but also for fertilizers. Some of the minerals that are and the chemicals in the water are used for fertilizing worldwide. This is the source. So for many years we've been taking out too much of this at a too fast of a pace.
The Dead Sea is a diplomatic investment for Jews and Jordanians with a joint water project in a region where Arabs and Jews do not see each other face to face.
In terms of tourism, Israel attracts around 3.5 million tourists per year annually, and at a very fast growing pace. I would say that there isn't a tourist that comes to Israel that doesn't choose to come to the Dead Sea, because it's such an attractive site, internationally known, and has such benefits. So I don't think that any tourist that comes to Israel doesn't come to the Dead Sea. And also there's a lot of domestic tourism, Israelis that come to bathe in the Dead Sea. It's just a short drive from Tel Aviv or from Jerusalem. So it's also domestically a wonderful site. In terms of religious significance, the sea itself, the Dead Sea, does not have any religious significance in Judaism. But many of the sites around the Dead Sea, which we may see some of the mountains here in the area, a lot of very significant occurrences in Jewish history happened in these areas. For example, the story of Masada. You may have heard of the story of Masada. It's just a short 10-minute drive from here, is where the big fortress of where a group of Jews who were under duress by one of the conquerors of this land, who stayed there for many days, and instead of they were under siege by the Roman armies, and instead of giving up to the Romans who wanted to convert them from Judaism, instead of giving up, they chose to take their own lives. So it's very significant for Jewish history.
Jericho equally is not far from here.
Jericho is a short drive from here, about 30-minute drive from here. So Israel in general is it's a small country, so a lot of the sites are quite close to each other. You know, we were in Jerusalem earlier today, and now we're in the Dead Sea. So it's quite convenient place to visit.
I love Israel.
The explanation puzzled me to ask why the Dead Sea diplomacy cannot be extended to solve all the troubles in the Middle East, at least among nations.
So right now we are right on the border between Syria and Israel, and I can imagine the challenge and the difficulty of securing this border. As far as my eyes can see on the horizon right there's a line that cuts between Israel and Syria. So We're just looking at Syria right now, and as I'm talking, there's heavy gunfire from a distance. I can tell that's heavy artillery, the explosions, the smoke, the skyline is a bit hazy, you can't see clearly, but they said this is a very, very hostile area. Anything can happen anytime, and it shows the difficulty of trying to secure the borderline. And it's amazing the kind of job that they're trying to do to secure these villages that are just right close to the Israeli border and the Syrian border at the same time.
Now I am in the Syrian-Israeli border here in the Golan Highlands. Now this area in particular used to be under the Syrian control up to 1967. And just after the 6 Days War, everything changed. The village of Kuneta down there used to be under Syrian control. That is no longer the case today. And over there is Syria, one of the most troubled countries in the Middle East today. Exactly 40 kilometers away from here is the capital city, Damascus. This is one of the hot spots of the century-old debate between Israel and its neighbors. And as we wander in this beautiful land of the holy areas, so many questions remain unanswered. Despite the beauty of the scenery, despite the holiness of the area, tensions here are very, very high. The people are good, living ordinary lives, but why can't that ordinary life be transformed into ordinary political activity? So many politicians have tried an answer. It is not an easy one to provide.
To understand the complexity of the response to that question, we move north of Israel. At times, we stop to eat. We stop to buy some souvenirs. We stop to admire the countryside. We stop to get explanations on some of the areas wherein we are found.
Reporting from the Israeli-Lebanese border here at the Golan Heights, this is Charles Ebune.
I am Dennis Sukari, and I'm here in Israel trying to understand the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. But where I am right now is Israel. Across, right behind me, is Lebanon. How are they managing their borderline? It's going to be very interesting because they say this is a highly volatile area. Anything can happen anytime.
This is a society that prefers questions than answers.
Go, go, go.
That is one of the greatest secrets of the Jewish state since creation, some 70 years ago. The presence of the military tells you that the peace language with her neighbors, especially on the northern part, is a house of cards. To keep the peace here is a Herculean task for a people whose part of their daily life consumption is war conception in a world full of enemies.
I would say the Golan Heights is probably the most secure place in Israel. Since 1967, the Syrian border has been quiet, more quiet than any. There are no, in quote-unquote, Palestinian Arabs that live in the Golan anywhere. In the north, there are Druze Arabs, and they're connected with Syria.
And this is a panoramic view of the Golan Heights, one of the tension lands between the Jews and her Arab neighbors ever since the 6 Days War of 1967. This was Syrian land, which is part of Israel today. Over 20,000 Syrians live in these areas, and there are also over 20,000 Israelis living in this area in over 30 settlements, which have made the Middle East peace process one of the most difficult deals to strike in the world with certainty.
How is ordinary life here? Business,
Just the
children,
same, just
school?
the same as every place else. You have to work, you have to pay the bills, you raise your family. You have a car, maybe not. You drive, you go here, there. It's no different than any other place.
You mingle with other tribes or people from Lebanon, Syria?
Do I meet them?
Yeah, do you people discuss?
Sometimes Druze Arabs will come here and to the artist village, and I'm happy to see everyone. I'm very happy to see you people here from Africa. Very happy. It's wonderful. And I wish that I could speak your language.
We will teach you.
Oh, I'm a very slow learner. I'm not good.
Okay, let me just tell you how they say good morning in my language, and you repeat after me.
Oh.
Bocheri.
Bocheri.
Bocheri, that is Bakundu language in Cameroon from Central Africa, which means good morning.
Okay, Bocheri. Yeah. But now it's afternoon.
Afternoon. Windy.
Oh.
Can you repeat that?
Of course. Windy. Windy. Windy.
Can you say
Morera? Morega. Like a parrot. That's right, I hear it once or twice.
The Golan Heights story is similar to Cameroon, while the Pico-Oliphant Agreement portioned Cameroon between the French and the British. The Sykes-Picot Agreement partitioned British Palestine in the collapsing Ottoman Empire to mix some Syrians and Jews randomly. All of this happens in 1916, while the British get much of Palestine because it was rich, giving the French just Lebanon and small portions of Syria. The French took a large portion of the Cameroons, the cause of some of the troubles we have today.
My name is Joel Friedman. This is my jewelry studio. I'm from a family of goldsmiths and silversmiths, 3 generations, 105 years. My grandfather, David Friedman, learned the trade in Hungary, in Budapest, in the early 1900s, and he took a boat to New York City, and after World War II, my father and my uncle came back from the war, and they became jewelers. And after Vietnam, me and my brother became jewelers, so we are all making jewelry. I came to Israel in 1964, first time. I was 13 years old, and I had a very good feeling. I felt so good. It's hard to explain. I think then I knew that I would be living here.
What has been your best and worst experience living around the Golan Heights area where we are?
I'm in the Golan Heights, living 20 years in the Golan Heights, and I haven't had any bad experiences.
Joe Freeman's account of the peacefulness in the Golan Heights, of the serenity in the Golan Heights, of the calmness in the Golan Heights, of the tranquility in the Golan Heights seems inaccurate. A good number of those wounded in the Syrian war, which has displaced at least 5 million people, plus hundreds of others dead, are treated in Jewish-managed and owned hospitals. The Galilee Specialized Hospital, situated some 40 kilometers from the Lebanese-Syrian-Israeli border, takes care of the victims, the wounded, the seriously hurt, and all those people simply called patients in this area. They tell us chilling, terrible, horrible, and blood-freezing stories, with some having their hands and legs cut or lost in the gunfire going on in their country, Syria. The medical philosophy here is that when we treat them well, they will go back and tell good stories about the Jewish people, and that may help to quench the animosity between the Jews and the Arabs. This is Israel's medical diplomacy, which most translate as humanism. as charity work at the service of people from all backgrounds. And the Jews see it as a way of sharing their first-class technology to better the lives of all across the world. And most of these charity networks and organizations are headquartered here in Tel Aviv, the partial capital of Israel, which is the country's New York, or the Douala of Israel, with some of the best buildings in the competitive Middle East architectural markets. Over 500,000 people live in this expanding metropolis and host to many businesses, including Innovate Africa, which is a company bringing Israeli technology to Africa.
Our focus is to bring solar energy. For the past 10 years, we have brought solar energy to 160 schools, medical centers, but most importantly, we use solar energy to pump water. So today we operate in 8 African countries, Cameroon being one of them. I'm pleased to say that only recently we joined forces with UNICEF and we went to Bertois and we used solar energy to pump water in Bertois where refugees are, and also we installed solar energy in different medical centers.
This is Innovate Africa, a team of dedicated problem solvers with a mission to bring Israeli solutions and know-how to those in need, living in rural African villages, using solar energy to pump clean water and provide schools, orphanages, and medical clinics with light and refrigeration to store vaccines and medicines.
There are so many people in Africa, and Africa is a large continent, but unfortunately in most African countries, only 20 to 30% of the population has access to electricity. So we believe that using solar energy is the most efficient and reliable source of energy. And also, the solution is simple and cheap. So with only a few solar panels, we're able to bring light to schools, light to medical centers, and refrigeration for vaccines and medicine. And as I mentioned earlier, the most importantly, because and thanks to the solar energy, we're able to pump water.
The story of Innovate Africa is fascinating and told at one of the cafes in Tel Aviv, where I listened piously to this woman, Sivan Yari, one of the most energetic female figures I have ever met, full of conviction.
As of today, we have helped about 1 million people, and we are being conservative. The most of our projects are done in Uganda, Malawi, Tanzania, but we also started working in Senegal, DR Congo, and as I mentioned earlier, we're now working in Cameroon, in Bertois. We also have a few projects in South Africa. We're looking to expand, and our goal is to reach 1,000 villages by 2025. To bring electricity to an entire medical center or a school, including the homes of the teachers, the nurses, the doctors, including a solar refrigeration, all of it, for a system that could last for 10 years or more. It only costs between $15,000 to $18,000. But even more impressive is to pump water. To install a very large solar water pumping, the cost of the drilling, of the solar tower, of installing different taps throughout the village, of helping thousands of people getting clean water, it's only $50,000. So the solutions are simple, the cost is minimal, and the impact is tremendous.
The desire to achieve this brings back the memory of how the Israeli Agency for International Cooperation was created, with a diamond jubilee celebrated this year. The then foreign minister and Israel's first and only female prime minister, Golda Meir, traveled to Africa and saw the misery of the people and decided to make Israel's contribution to humanity, although a nascent nation. Everything I saw in Israel is not recounted here, simply because there is a life beyond television. There is life beyond the camera. There is life beyond internet. And there is life off the microphone. And as I journeyed back to Cameroon, I was reminded by certainty. The Jews are a society of conviction, and as they continue to wait for their Messiah, the sun is yet to set on Israel.